Welcome to Politics Nation. I'm Al Sharpton. Tonight's lead, let the gaffes begin. Mitt Romney has stumbled out of the gate on what was supposed to be his debut on the world stage. It started in London when Romney insulted his Olympic host in an interview with NBC's Brian Williams.
And in the short time you've been here in London, do they look ready to your experienced eye?
You know, it's hard to know just how well it will turn out. There are a few things that were disconcerting. The stories about the private security firm not having enough people, the supposed strike of the immigration and customs officials. That obviously is not something which is encouraging.
Not encouraging, disconcerting. The folks in London have been working on this for 15 years. They've spent $14 billion to make it happen. And Romney says he's not encouraged. That was bad enough. But then he expressed doubt about whether the British people would rise to the occasion.
The people of the country, do they come together and celebrate the Olympic moment? And that's something which we only find out once the games actually begin.
Reaction from the British press was swift and severe, and London's mayor called out Romney in front of thousands of people.
A guy called Mitt Romney, who wants to know whether we're ready. He wants to know whether we're ready. Are we ready? Are we ready?
The British Prime Minister also fired back, taking a pot shot at Romney's Olympic Games in Salt Lake City.
I think we'll show the whole world, not just that we come together as a United Kingdom, but also we're extremely good at welcoming people from across the world. So I'll obviously make those points to Mitt Romney. Look, we are holding an Olympic Games in one of the busiest, most active, bustling cities anywhere in the world. I mean, of course, it's easier if you hold an Olympic Games in the middle of nowhere.
The middle of nowhere? Ouch. And now the Salt Lake City mayor is getting into it, saying the prime minister can stop by any time. We'd love to have him and are happy to send a map so he doesn't run into any trouble locating the middle of nowhere. Them's fighting words. Romney has practically started an international incident, and his European vacation is only getting worse. Late today, Romney was spotted arriving at a posh five-star hotel for a fundraiser with executives whose banks are linked to one of the worst financial scandals in history, a plot to rig interest rates in Europe. Is that how Romney's going to erase his 1% image? By cuddling with London bankers, toasting each other over during their financial scandal? Along the way, Romney has also revealed why he's afraid to come clean on his tax returns and pointed out how his economic policy is basically Bush 0.0. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, I want to say that I think I know why Romney seems to have such a beef with London. His heart belongs to another city.
I have a lot of memories of France. I think the best memories were with my wife on vacations from time to time in France. The last vacation we had there, walking around the city of Paris and walking not just in the Champs-Élysées, but also over to the Jardin of Luxembourg.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Mitt Romney et je suis président du comité d'organisation des Jeux olympiques d'hiver de 2002 à Salt Lake City.
In fairness to Mr. Romney, that was not today. But joining me now is Melissa Harris Perry, host of Melissa Harris Perry here on MSNBC, and Steve Kornacki, co-host of The Cycle, also here on MSNBC. Thank you both for being here.
Sure.
Melissa, this is the biggest story in England right now. I mean, it led to BBC News tonight. What happened to Romney?
Well, it's great. And I've been trying to figure out if this is a little bit like the NAACP moment when sort of Romney's doing pretty well, and then all of a sudden he just starts to stumble, first with the Obamacare line, and then later when he talks about free stuff. And what, the major analysis behind that was, well, when Romney said free stuff, he was actually signaling. It was kind of a dog whistle. I actually wanted the booze.
Yeah,
right?
That's what I felt.
Right. So I'm wondering if, because the critique of President Obama is that he is a cosmopolitan president, that he's someone who has an understanding of the world, that by going overseas and making a mess of it, making a gaffe of it, being sort of ridiculously non-cosmopolitan, when we see that he obviously is. There he is talking about vacationing in France, speaking French. If it's his way of saying, see, don't worry, I'm so American, I'm so kind of Joe Sixpack that I don't even know the right thing to say in London.
Yeah, but Steve, he's coming off, well, let me give you this. The political editor of the Daily Mail, James Chapman, says, another verdict from one Romney meeting, apparently devoid of charm, warmth, humor, or sincerity. Serious dismay in Whitehall at Romney debut. Worse than Sarah Palin. Total car crash. New York Times says Mr. Romney toured an exhibit with Foreign Secretary William Hague. His campaign shared in an email that their conversation was broad and wide-ranging. Also worth noting, the email read, they both discussed their mutual love of Kit Kat bars.
Kit Kats are
I mean,
good.
how can you take this man seriously, making these kind of gaffes, getting these kind of analysis, and he's running to be the head of the free world?
My best guess for what happened here is he just stepped in it. And I think if I had to guess how the sort of sequence of events, it would be that he kind of prepared for the trip by doing what anybody would, reading up on how the British media is handling the Olympics. And I think if you're in Britain, there's been a lot of controversy, I think, in the run-up to these games. There's been a lot of outrage generated in the press and among sort of the masses about, the cost of it, the planning behind it, the government's execution of it. So all the things that Romney was kind of articulating to Brian Williams in that interview are really, they're very prominent in the British media's coverage of the Olympics. But when you're the visiting American dignitary and you start giving voice to those things, it sounds a lot different than if you're somebody, who lives in Britain every day.
I think, and I had my own theory that I said on the show, that he was trying to get booed at the NAACP. Yep. But I think on this one, when he was doing the interview with Brian Williams, I think he was talking as a CEO of the Olympics, not as a dignitary, not as a candidate. He went into business mode and started analyzing, Melissa, how they were doing it compared to him as CEO. It was like I was a better CEO kind of thing. He went into his private sector mode.
Well, and it's a fair point, specifically when we talk about the fact that politics, and particularly international geopolitics, is an actual skill. So if you're going to say, oh, you should pick me because I'm the CEO and therefore I should be president, notice that this is therefore what might happen. That instead of having an awareness of what his positionality is as a visiting American, instead of having an understanding of how this could create sort of multiple, never mind the fact that if there are weaknesses in security, he just indicated them to the world press, right? Like, those are the kinds of things that an actual careful president needs to never do as a matter of national security and again, world politics and diplomacy.
Now, he in more domestic political discussion with Brian Williams, he talked about why he will not release his tax returns. Brian Williams came at him outright on that. Let me show you what he says, Steve.
I'm following the same precedent that was put in place by John McCain. 2 years, and by the way, hundreds of pages of returns for the Democrat operatives to go through and twist and distort and to turn in different directions and try and make a big deal out of.
Yeah, I don't think the average voter sees the release of a candidate's tax returns primarily as something that just serves as fodder for the other party's opposition researchers. He keeps framing it this way that, hey, the more I put out there, the more the other party is going to have to attack and distort me over. And there's some truth to that in general. That's just how politics works. The more you put out there, the other side is always going to attack it. But I think people view...
Well, if that was the case, no one would release it.
Yeah, I think people view the issue of tax returns as something that's expected of politicians at a certain level. I don't know if there's a certain number of years that people in their minds think, it has to be 5, it has to be 10, it has to be whatever. But we were talking about a guy who says, I'm going to release 2 years. And by the way, he's really only released 1 right now. There's just an estimate for the second year. But I'm going to release 2 years, and there's hundreds of pages in there. He's somebody whose taxes are that
he has a lot of money and a lot of
right. And I think when people, an awareness of that makes people think, yeah, I'd like to see a little bit more here, not, oh no, let's keep the Democratic, opposition researchers.
Then also, Melissa, in the same interview, he listed 5 ways his economic policies will be different from George W. Bush. Listen to this.
1, take advantage of our energy resources, particularly natural gas, but also coal, oil, nuclear, renewables. Number two, trade. I want to dramatically increase trade, and particularly with Latin America. Number three, take action to get America on track to have a balanced budget. Number four, we've got to show better training and education opportunities for our current workers and for coming workers. And then finally, what I call restoring economic freedom. That means keep our taxes as low as possible.
Platitudes. I mean, first of all, those are, I want trade.
Yeah.
Sure, right? So some of that is platitudes.
Freedom, justice.
Freedom, justice, the American way. Woo! Right? So some of that is just sort of saying words that resonate. Some of that is talking quite specifically about Obama-era policies. He's talking about keeping taxes low. I'm not sure what he thinks he means by that, but certainly in this moment, President Obama has kept taxes extremely low, even in the context of our economic recovery. And I think what he means, obviously, is maintaining those Bush-era tax cuts at the very top, something that President Obama has indicated he thinks needs to expire in order for us to move towards balanced budget. And then some of the other small things that he was talking about there, sort of workforce training, that kind of thing, is actually
workforce, energy. But I was very proud of him to admit that George Bush didn't work on those things. Yeah. I think Willard is doing better. Melissa, Steve, we will be watching the rest of the Romney comedy tour. Tour to Europe and the Middle East. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Be sure to catch Melissa Harris Perry weekends at 10 a.m. Eastern, and tune in to The Cycle weekdays at 3 p.m. Eastern. Still ahead, President Obama speaks out on gun violence and why this debate should just come down to one thing: common sense.
I also believe that a lot of gun owners would agree that AK-47s belong in the hands of soldiers, not in the hands of criminals. They belong on the battlefield of war, not on the streets of our cities.
Plus, paranoia, activity. Another day, another Republican comes out in support of Michelle Bachmann's wacky conspiracy theory. You're watching Politics Nation on MSNBC.